I burned out in early February last year. Not because I was lazy, not because I lacked discipline. I crashed because I made the plan that way. I didn't know it in December when I mapped out my ambitious year. But the moment I wrote upload 3x week starting January 1st, I scheduled the breakdown. The date was already on the calendar. I just couldn't see it yet. Here's what nobody tells you about planning your year. The burnout isn't happening in February. You're scheduling it right now. Every time you write a goal, assuming January, you motivated, energized, ready to dominate, will show up every single week for 12 months. But February, different person, depleted, running on fumes you didn't know you were burning. And the plan you're making this week doesn't account for that version of you. So when February you crashes, you think it's personal failure. It's not. It's structural design. This is what's happening to thousands of creators right now. It's planning season. The algorithm's been punishing for months. Growth has been slower than you wanted. So you sit down to plan next year and you tell yourself, this is the year you finally figure it out. This is the year you get consistent, disciplined, all in. So you build the plan. Upload schedule 3 times a week, no excuses. Content batching, you'll figure it out as you go. Rest days, you'll take them when you hit your subscriber goal. The plan feels ambitious. It feels like what serious creators do, and you genuinely believe that if you just commit hard enough, you can sustain it. But here's the thing about ambitious annual plans. They're not ambitious. They're burnout blueprints. Because they assume stable conditions, they assume January energy in February, March motivation in April. They assume your capacity doesn't fluctuate, that your mental health, your physical energy, your creative reserves will just stay constant because you decided they should. The month you spend planning, you're operating at December energy. Maybe you're recharged from holiday time. Maybe you're writing end-of-year motivation. So when you write upload 3x week, it feels doable. Of course you can maintain that. You're doing it right now in your head while planning. The problem? You're not doing it in February when your buffer is gone, your energy is shot, and every upload feels like pushing a boulder uphill. And when February you crashes because structurally you scheduled the crash, you don't blame the plan. You blame yourself. I wasn't disciplined enough. I couldn't stay consistent. I'm not cut out for this. The plan stays perfect in your mind. You become the failure, and next December, you make the same plan again, just with more pressure this time, because clearly the problem was that you didn't commit hard enough. This is the loop. Ambitious goals that ignore human energy cycles. Burnout that feels like personal failure. Self-blame that fuels even more ambitious goals next time. And the whole time you're not getting more resilient, you're getting more depleted. Each cycle takes longer to recover from, until eventually you're not planning the next year. You're wondering if you should quit entirely. Here's the reframe that changes everything. You don't burn out in February. You burn out in December when you make a plan that assumes you're a machine, not a human. The problem isn't your discipline. It's that your plan is designed for a version of you that doesn't exist. January, you is a fiction. February, you is the reality. And if your plan can't survive February, it's not an ambitious plan, it's a prediction of when you'll break. Let me show you the difference. Ambitious means challenging but sustainable. A burnout blueprint means impossible to maintain, but you'll try anyway until you crash. Ambitious accounts for low energy weeks. Burnout blueprints assume every week is high energy or you're failing. Ambitious includes buffers. Burnout blueprints assume you'll figure it out when things get hard. The research backs this up. Studies on energy management show that humans operate in cycles, not constant output. You have high energy days and low energy days, high capacity weeks and survival weeks. This isn't weakness, it's biology. Your nervous system has a budget. You can spend energy on creation, decision-making, recovery, emotional regulation, But you can't spend more than you have indefinitely, and a plan that demands peak output every single week, that's not a plan. That's a debt you're taking out against your future capacity. And the bill comes due in February. Think about it this way. If you were planning a road trip and ignored the fact that your car needs gas, you wouldn't make it to the destination. You'd run out of fuel halfway, sit on the side of the road, and blame yourself for not driving harder. That's what most annual plans do. They plot the destination, they ignore the fuel, and when you run out, you think the problem is your driving, not the plan that never accounted for refueling. Your plan right now? If it doesn't include scheduled rest, built-in buffers, and contingency for low-energy weeks, you're not planning to succeed. You're planning the date you'll crash. You just can't see it yet because you're operating at December energy while planning for February reality. All right, the actual framework, not theory, not motivation, the pre-burnout buffer system. 3 pillars that restructure how you build a year that survives contact with reality. Pillar 1, December. Preparation, not January execution. Most creators start executing their plan January 1st. That's the mistake. The work happens now before the year starts. Specifically, content batching. Before January begins, you need 4 to 6 weeks of content already created, edited, and scheduled, not outlined, finished, ready to upload. This sounds impossible until you realize you're in the planning window right now. The shift is using this month for intentional batching instead of scattered holiday content. 2 focused weekends, 8 to 10 video ideas, batch record them across 4 days. Edit them before the year turns. By the time January starts, you have 6 weeks of Q1 covered. Day 1 of the new year, you're not scrambling to create. You're maintaining a buffer while your energy is still high. Why this works? It decouples creation from algorithmic pressure. When February hits and your energy tanks cut, you're not forcing yourself to create from depletion. You're uploading from the reserve you built when you had capacity. The buffer doesn't just protect your upload schedule, it protects your mental health because the guilt of I should be creating disappears when you already did the work. Here's the window. 2 weekends, 1 pre-holiday week. That's your production time. Weekend 1, record 4 videos. Weekend 2, record 4 more. Pre-holiday week, edit all 8. You're not adding work to your year. You're front-loading January and February into December when you still have capacity. Pillar 2, energy-based goals, not time-based metrics. Stop planning uploads per week. Start planning energy per creation cycle. The traditional plan says 3 uploads per week, 52 weeks. The buffer system says 1 high-energy creation day per week with 2-week minimum viable consistency. What this means practically, you're not trying to upload 3 times a week for a year. You're protecting 1 day a week where you have the energy to create something good. That might produce 3 videos some weeks when you're batching. That might produce 1 video other weeks when you're recovering. The metric isn't output volume. It's whether you maintained the energy to create without destroying yourself. The minimum viable consistency is your safety net. If the worst week happens, sick, exhausted, life chaos, what's the absolute minimum that keeps the channel alive? For most creators, it's 1 upload per week. That becomes your floor, not your ceiling. Anything above that is bonus, not obligation. This reframes how you relate to your own output. You're not failing when you post once, you're succeeding at sustainability. Pillar 3, scheduled rest as strategic advantage. This is the hardest mental shift. Rest isn't something you earn after you succeed. Rest is what enables you to succeed. The buffer you built in December? It purchases guilt-free rest in February. You take full days off, not because you're behind, but because you're ahead. And that rest isn't weakness. It's what refills the tank so you can keep creating in March, April, May. The tactical implementation. Your calendar has 2 types of weeks marked: creation weeks and recovery weeks. Creation weeks, you're producing content, editing, uploading, engaging. Recovery weeks, you do the minimum viable consistency and nothing more. You're not trying to get ahead. You're protecting your capacity to sustain the pace. When I implemented this, the first recovery week felt like cheating, like I was getting away with something I shouldn't. But by the third recovery week, I noticed something. My creation weeks got more productive. The ideas came faster. The editing went smoother because I wasn't creating from a deficit anymore. I was creating from a place of actual capacity. The rest wasn't stealing time from my goals. It was funding them. The whole system works together. December batching creates the buffer. Energy-based goals remove the guilt when output varies. Scheduled rest prevents the slow-motion burnout that kills channels in Q2 after they survived Q1. You're not trying to be superhuman. You're designing around being human. And that's what actually makes it sustainable. Let me show you what this looked like in practice. I ran 2 Q1s as different experiments. Year 1, I used the traditional ambitious goals plan. Year 2, I used the buffer system. Year 1, new year starts. I had a plan, upload 3 times a week, no excuses. 2 weeks in, I was already behind, missed 1 upload, told myself I'd make it up. 6 weeks later, I was forcing every video. The quality dropped. My judgment was impaired, but I couldn't tell because I was too depleted to evaluate my own work. Early February, I sat down to write a description and couldn't form a sentence. The words were in my head. They wouldn't come out. That was the moment I knew something had broken. I took 3 weeks off, not planned, forced, came back trying to rebuild momentum. It took months to feel like I had any creative energy again. The worst part? The ambitious plan felt like it was working until the moment it wasn't. There was no gradual decline I could catch, just a sudden crash that looked like personal failure. Year 2, mid-December, I batch recorded 6 videos over 2 weekends. Felt like a lot of work compressed, but when January hit, my Q1 was already handled. I uploaded twice a week through January. Took 4 full rest days in February. Actual rest, not guilty scrolling thinking about work. The channel grew 23% that quarter. Not because the content was dramatically better, because I had the capacity to make strategic decisions instead of survival decisions. The buffer gave me space to think clearly about what was actually working. Here's the comparison that matters. Year 1, I created more videos total, but I lost 3 weeks to burnout, another 6 weeks to recovery. Year 2, I created fewer videos, but I never stopped. I maintained momentum through the entire year because I didn't destroy myself in Q1. The year I tried to be more productive was the year I was least effective. The year I protected my capacity was the year I actually grew. The insight output volume doesn't predict growth. Sustainable output does. You can force high volume for 6 weeks. Then you crash, lose 3 months, and spend the rest of the year trying to recover. Or you can design for sustainable pace from the start and actually be present for the entire year. One of those approaches builds a channel, the other builds burnout that looks productive until it isn't. So remember at the start, I burned out in February. Not because I wasn't disciplined, because I made a plan in December that scheduled the breakdown. The moment I wrote upload 3x week, starting January 1st without building a buffer, without planning for low energy weeks, without scheduling rest, I set the crash in motion. I just didn't see it coming. You don't burn out in February. You burn out in December when you make a plan that assumes you're not human, when you write goals that ignore energy cycles, when you build a system that has no margin for the reality that some weeks you'll be depleted. The problem isn't your discipline, it's that your plan demands constant peak performance from a nervous system that operates in cycles. These 3 pillars, December batching, energy-based goals, scheduled rest, they're not about working less. They're about working in a way that doesn't destroy your capacity to keep working. The buffer you build in December protects you in February. The energy-based goals remove the guilt when output fluctuates. The scheduled rest funds your ability to create in Q2, Q3, Q4 after everyone else crashes in Q1. Here's what I need you to understand. The plan you're making right now is either a strategy for survival or a blueprint for burnout. There's no in between. If you're building your year around January energy, assuming you'll just push through the hard weeks, telling yourself you'll rest when you hit your goal, you're scheduling a crash, you're setting it in motion, you just can't see it yet. So here's what you do: not overhaul everything. Just this: before you finalize any plan, ask yourself one question. Can February me, depleted, exhausted, questioning everything, maintain this pace? If the answer is no, you're not planning for success. You're planning when you'll break. The creators who survive Q1 aren't the ones with the most ambitious goals. They're the ones who planned for burnout in December and designed around it. They built the buffer. They protected their energy. They scheduled the rest before they needed it. And when February came, they had capacity because they never burned through their reserves pretending to be machines. Your annual plan right now, before you commit to anything, run it through that filter. Would February you survive this? Would April you? Or are you designing for January? You and hoping discipline carries you when energy runs out? The distinction between those two approaches is the distinction between sustainable growth and predictable burnout. You get to decide. Build the buffer now or schedule the crash later. Those are your options. There's no third path where you ignore your humanity and it works out anyway. That's the fantasy that burns creators out every single year. The reality is simpler. Design for the human you actually are, not the machine you wish you were. That's what survives Q1. That's what builds a channel that lasts past February. You now see when burnout gets scheduled. But knowing doesn't stop the cycle. There's a reason you keep making the same plan, even after it breaks you. Why your brain treats ambitious goals like obligations you can't question. If the next video's on screen, it unpacks that.